So hello everybody, welcome to this video. This is, oh boy. So I just watched the new Dark Tower movie, okay? And I did this pretty much just so I could talk about it because, like many people, I was cautiously optimistic going um, into this whole movie thing because with a movie being announced and it being in like production trouble for like a long time, years, I was really skeptical that it would be good. And then the reviews started hitting. Everyone was like, "Oh no, oh no." So, ironically, with Dark Tower hovering around a 19% on Rotten Tomatoes, the only reason I watched this movie was just so I could talk about it here. Oh boy, I don't even know where to begin. I'm going to start in a very simple place because I feel like everybody's like incredulity and just crapping on this movie like no tomorrow is warranted, but at the same time not accurate. For someone who has never read the books, the movie would function as a bland, personality-less, acceptable action movie. That's like Book of Eli, Terminator Salvation level, like 5 out of 10, all the way across in every way. Um, and with that being said, obviously, like, it's not incompetent. Um, it's not super poor. But at the same time, it feels like a $60 million movie. $60 million action movie. But as a fan of the series, this is a train wreck. All right, and not the kind that lands you in Topeka. This is a train wreck of the highest order. It's fundamentally broken, this movie, as a Dark Tower adaptation, okay? And I'm going to get into why it's broken. Okay, so I'm not going to get into spoilers quite yet. I'm going to keep it pretty vague. But then I'll disclaim when I go into spoilers. So, the fundamental structure, goal, and purpose of the Dark Tower series is undermined and truncated in the movie. I had some Aragon flashbacks when I was watching this movie. For anyone who's read the Inheritance cycle, which was Aragon, Eldest, Brissinger, Inheritance. Each book getting like slowly worse. Like the last, like Inheritance was not a good book in my mind. But I grew up with that series, as I'm sure a lot of people my age did. It was an enjoyable fantasy series for the first two books. But the movie adaptation was garbage. Like one of the worst book to movie adaptations, hands down. I guarantee you, if you look at any list of worst book to movie adaptations, it'll be on there. Because it's just horrible. Absolutely horrible. Like, main characters from the series, one main character, like, gets just a side character in the movie for, like, a brief scene and then they're gone. Like Angela the Fortune Teller. So, I mean, I kind of felt like that when I was watching this, where it's like, they tried to take the series and just kind of shove it into 90 minutes. And like I say that, and it's not like a lot of things happen. Like in Aragon, a lot of things happened. In terms of like in the movie, just like, oh, there's Angela and she's gone. Okay. In this, it's truly the most condensed form you could possibly get with the fewest characters possible in the cheapest way to get like most of these 7 books milked into a movie. And like I said, as someone who hasn't read the books, this would just be a passable action movie in that sense. But as someone who has read the books, it was just not faithful, and not even on like a different cycle level. I'll get into that later. There was just some fundamental things in Dark Tower that just can't be changed without breaking what is the Dark Tower. And I felt like that movie kind of tickled a couple things and was like, scooch over, we're gonna get in here, we're gonna just completely screw you. Bad. If you haven't seen the movie, if you haven't read the books, honestly, like I said, passable, acceptable action movie, barely passable. Skip it. Skip the movie. If you haven't seen it or haven't read the books, skip the movie. It's comparable to, like I said, Terminator Salvation, which was skippable. You don't need to see it. There's better stuff out there. And honestly, just dive into the books. Really, that's where it's at. So I'm going to get into spoilers here. Like I said, if you haven't seen the movie, haven't read the books, don't see the movie. Horrible. It'll ruin the books, actually. Like, if you see the movie, it'll kind of ruin the books. Because it takes a pretty pivotal moment from the very last book and makes it part of the movie. And I actually wasn't expecting that to be a thing, but it was in there, and it's like, well, this just, like I said, shoves it all together. You don't even have time for highlights because it's 90 minutes of a bigger than Lord of the Rings size series. That's a big deal. So, again, don't see the movie. Read the books. Here come spoilers for people who have read the books. I would say, if you've read the books and seen the movie, great. If you've read the books, haven't seen the movie, don't worry about it. I'm here to talk about that. That's kind of who I'm talking to right now. But people who have seen the movie will kind of be on the same page as me. So spoilers begin. Oh boy. Okay. Where do I start? What do I talk about first? I think the thing that really let's just stay on the movie level before we kind of dip into it. The thing that kills me about this and really confuses me is that they've told the whole Dark Tower story. Like, when I saw that it was going to be it said, like, oh, adapting the first book and part of the Wastelands. I'm like, okay. I saw the trailer. I saw that Jake goes in through the what's it called? Something Hill House, Duke Hill. I don't remember. Something like that. He goes in through there like he did in the third book. I'm like, okay, if you want to take that route for him getting to Midworld, fine, whatever. But I'm like, adapting the first book. Okay, cool. And then the trailers, like, showed the breakers with the beams. I'm like, why are you showing the breakers? I don't know why you would want to show that. Why is this in the movie? That's in the last book. So I see the movie and I'm like, oh, okay. So you took the haunted house from book 3 to get him to Midworld, just like I thought. Okay, but you didn't do anything from the first book. Nothing. There are no events from the first book that are in this movie at all that I can think of. You don't have Tull. You do not have you don't have the way station. That's not how Jake gets to Midworld. You do not have the Oracle in the mountains. You don't have the slow mutants. You don't have the scene with Walter where he shows Roland the vision and then 10 years pass. None of that happens. None of it. It's completely new stuff. And that's what kind of threw me off a little bit. Like, I was expecting some, like, oh, Jake's in Midworld now. I guess we're going to see, like, because The movie starts. I'm going to kind of dip in here. The movie starts with like 20 minutes of Jake in New York, modern day, not 1977, modern day New York. Jake Chambers, and he's having visions. He's having visions of Midworld, of Roland, of Man in Black, of the Tower. What could it all mean? Everyone thinks he's crazy. Even his psychiatrist, who has a photo of the Stanley Hotel for no good reason on his thing. It's just to add another like Easter egg. And it makes no sense unless the guy's a massive The Shining fan. It's Kubrick version. No reason to have that photo. I don't know why he had it. Anyway, come to find out, later in the movie, you find out Jake has The Shining, right? And they call it is The Shine. They call it The Shine multiple times. They really hammer that home more than they should. That he has The Shine. Wink, wink, nudge, nudge. Remember that book and movie, The Shining? This is a Stephen King universe. A little much. I don't. It's been a while, obviously, since I've read the books. I mean, I finished the books shortly before I made that thoughts on video for the books, which was, I don't even know how long ago. Let me look. And a lot of information has been lost in my mind since then. This was 2014. This was 3 years ago. So, and I haven't really like been in that world since. So a lot of information has been lost. I've been kind of brushing up on the wiki, stuff like that, kind of referencing the movie a little bit, trying to like see differences. And I kind of have remembered a few things, but like I said, if there's something that I kind of forgot about or don't remember, don't crucify me. I'm just a forgetful person who hasn't read the books in 3 years. Anyway, what was I talking about? The Shining. Jake has The Shining. As far as I know, like I said, could be wrong, don't remember that being part of the books. I don't remember Jake having any special abilities like that. I hope somebody can back me up on that. I think he's just a kid who doesn't have The Shining. Anyway, he dreams of the Dark Tower. And for 20 minutes, it's just him. Well, I mean, like, I think we get some Walter stuff, but you don't get to see Midworld, really, like, in any full sense, like first person or third person, well, first person. And you don't get to see Roland in a really full sense until Jake shows up in Midworld. And I think that was a huge mistake. If I'm going to be honest, straightforward here, I think I'm safe in saying this. They seriously failed with Roland in the movie. I think the casting choice was bad. Not to be racist, but I think casting a black person was unnecessary. If they were to cast Idris Elba as Roland, I trust them not to do it because he's black and they want to be progressive, but because he was a good fit. But he was not a good fit. I don't think he was a good Roland. I've seen some people say he is, but I honestly don't think he captured the essence of Roland that well. Not to say his acting is bad. I think he was poorly directed in this movie, as was Matthew McConaughey a little bit. But I think he's a fine actor. I've seen him in stuff where I've enjoyed his performances. I don't think he's fit for Roland. I don't think he's the right kind of guy. Clint Eastwood's son, whatever his name is, he would have been great. Like, that is the image, right? That's like who it is. Why change that? I don't know. I just don't understand why you would stray from that formula, and I don't think Idris Elba captured it. But when we're presented to Roland, and even throughout the movie, I feel like this review is all over the place, but I don't care. The movie is all over the place, so it's poetry. It's like they rhyme. Um, Idris Elba, Roland. I don't like I said. I think it's just the directing. Also, the writing is a huge part of this problem too. Roland doesn't come across as cool, calm, and collected. He kind of feels like a wet noodle at times. He feels like when you read the books, you get a real sense that Roland is like pretty methodical, doesn't make many mistakes. It's not like he thinks things out. He's just super, super focused, attentive, and alert. And I did not get that sense in this movie. I felt that Roland wasn't like. In the books, you feel Roland is impenetrable. Um, Aside from, like, I mean, obviously in book two, he loses two of his fingers, two or three or whatever. So obviously he's not fully impenetrable, but you get the sense that this is a force to be reckoned with. Um, Impenetrable more in like an emotional sense. Like you can't quite get a read on this guy in the books. You don't quite know what his his game is, as you're going through, and then as the series plays out, you get a better read on him, and then that culminates into a great finale. But with the movie, they totally ruined that, and a huge, huge part of that was his reason for going after Randall Flagg. They totally botched this. I don't know why they did this. They made it. They didn't have time to do it this way, is also the thing. They made it a single scene and it was over, and you didn't have time. It was a stupid scene, too. So, in the books, in the comics, Roland's dad, Stephen, I think dies. Oh, how does he die? I just saw this a little bit ago too. He died. Look it up on the wiki. I think he dies at the Battle of Jericho Hill. No, it was something else. It was the Fall of Gilead. So in Gilead is where Stephen Deschain dies in like a showdown, and it's like pretty cool. In the movie, he's just camping with his son, Roland, and then they hear a spoopy noise, and they both take out their guns, and they're just spinning around, and they're like both reciting the Gunslinger's Creed for no good reason whatsoever. And then Walter O'Dim shows up, and he's like, "Stop breathing!" And Stephen Deschain stops breathing and suffocates and dies. And Roland is looking down at him like, and like Walter's walking away and like catches the bullet. It's like, "When will you learn?" And, like, that's the scene. I'm like, what did you just do? What did you do to Stephen? And then that's the whole reason that Roland is following Walter and going after him. And Walter isn't even going through the desert. The Man in Black is not going through the desert. He's not fleeing. He's jumping around, going through portals and doing all kinds of like his evil bidding. See, in the books, the Man in Black fled across the desert, Gunslinger followed. He followed because the Man in Black, I don't know if he knew this. I think did he reveal? I think he revealed this at the fall at Jericho Hill, that he actually was the man who slept with his mother behind his dad's back. There's like that whole backstory. And I think it's touched on in the Gunslinger, actually. And also, like, there was basically some things that happened. I think he killed Cuthbert or Elaine. I think it was Cuthbert at the Battle of Jericho Hill. And that was kind of the genesis of the Man in Black foot across the desert. Gunslinger followed. Like, Gunslinger's been following Man in Black for a long time because of those reasons. Not because he killed his dad. Now, I understand that you're truncating this thing and trying to make it a 90-minute deal. But you're tossing the baby out with the bathwater in doing this. You have an empty bath. It's a boring thing, an empty bath, let me tell you. I mean, you barely see this guy's dad, and then he's dead. In a funny way, too. Stop breathing. And he stops breathing. Like, I didn't realize that he died. I thought he was just, like, being tortured by not being able to breathe, and then he's dead. So that's a big problem. But even more so, and this is probably the biggest problem, one of the biggest problems of the movie, is that they undermined Roland's goal. Roland's goal in the books is to get to the Dark Tower. In the beginning of the series, he's chasing the Man in Black for those reasons, but he also thinks that this guy has some answers that'll get him to the tower. Okay? Presumably. Right? That's the genesis. But in the series, Roland Deschain is getting to the tower at all costs. He lets Jake die because of this in the series. In the movie, Roland wants to get revenge for his father dying. It doesn't sound like he wants to get to the Dark Tower at all. That doesn't sound like it's his goal. That's never his clear goal in the movie. He wants to avenge his father by killing Walter. Like, you've taken the whole crux of this series, the whole crux of the ending of the series, of the loop even, and thrown that away and replaced it with this avenging father deal. Like, Roland has to get to the tower, but in the movie he doesn't. And that's the biggest problem, I think, for me, that I realized was they fundamentally changed that. And to talk about the cycle thing for a second. So there was some like marketing that came out from like Stephen King himself about the movie that made it look like this movie was a new cycle, basically a sequel to the series. Because in the series ends, massive spoilers. Roland gets to the top of the tower and it resets him to the Mohaine Desert. Have I said Mojave? I may have said Mojave a couple times. The Mohaine Desert, beginning of the series, and the book ends with the same line as the first book began with. Man in Black fled across the desert, gunslinger followed. I could be wrong, but I feel like the number 19 shows up a lot in the books because this is presumed to be Roland's 19th time through the series, through to the Dark Tower. And that on the 20th time he'll have the Horn of Eld and he'll get it right, just like in the poem. With the movie, I was like, okay, so that almost gives the movie like an immunity to criticism, because in the movie anything could happen. Like, I actually thought about that at the end of the Dark Tower. I was at the very end of the series, I was like, oh, so he's doing a new run. Like, I wonder how much stuff could be different. Does he meet Eddie and Susanna and Jake and Oy and all those people? Or is it something like fundamentally different? Does something really different happen? And did he meet people similar or even the same people on his previous 18 runs or whatever? That was an idea I had. So I thought, if this is going to be like the 20th run through and it's going to be a little different, it's like, okay, that makes it a little easier to stomach that, like, Roland is black now for no apparent reason. Like, cast a black actor for a very specific Clint Eastwood-esque image that's been through all the artwork of the books. Same with the comics. I mean, like, dude's white. Not like I said, not to be racist. It's just a drastic image change that is a little jarring. You can get away with some stuff, I thought, like, and that almost makes it like impenetrable to criticism. And I thought about that, like, before watching the movie. I was like, I wonder if everyone's just complaining for no good reason, and maybe this is all stuff that can be explained away by saying it's the 20th and last cycle. But the biggest problems in the whole thing go beyond the 20th cycle problem. Like I said, having Roland not have that itch to get to the tower pervasively to the point where he sacrifices Jake, and not having that is a huge problem. And I think goes against the entire grain of that the Dark Tower is cut from. And the other just being that it's truncated like crazy. Like I said, a little part of book 3 is in there. Nothing from book 1. Absolutely nothing. And the climax in the beginning of book 7 is the climax of the movie. Like I said, when I saw the breakers, I was like, why is this here? Not only that, they didn't really talk about the beams holding up the tower. Not like in any like serious way. And the breakers are just like hitting the tower. They're not even breaking the beams. Oh, okay, the breakers. Every like topic is just like I just want to facepalm. The breakers in the book, it's a much more nuanced thing. The breakers, I don't even know, I could be wrong again. I don't even know if they know what they're doing. Like I think they say like to break is is divine. It's like they're like telepathic people who are like working on a project. And come to find out, they're breaking the beams that are holding the tower up. In the movie, they're breaking the tower, and it's a bunch of kids that have the shine, who are being like controlled against their will to do this. I'm like, what are you doing? You're ruining the last book. You're ruining the beginning of the last book. So with this being the climax of the movie, which also Walter dies presumably. Obviously, I mean it's the way it was filmed and edited. Looks like they didn't linger on his death too much. And like you just see his dead body and then it cuts to something else. So I don't know what they're trying to do with that. I think it's assumed he'll come back. They want McConaughey to come back, so it makes sense. But if you have a single Dark Tower movie with the intention of making sequels, and you make the destruction of the Breaker Station at presumably what is Blue Heaven, what are you going to do for the rest of it? Like, you have to go away from the book material. And honestly, I don't know if I trust people who aren't Stephen King to do that. Like, I think that this script was just haphazard. There were too many cooks in the kitchen. There was some pretty weak sauce in this broth. And I don't know if I can trust. Like I think they want like Eddie and Susanna to show up, presumably in the next movie, if they make one. And I'm just thinking, okay, so the climax of the first movie is actually the part where Eddie will die, and you want to introduce Eddie. So like, what are you gonna do with him? Like, what's his arc gonna be? I think that's like taking on way too much. Like, that's a lot to handle. To say like, all right, with the first movie, we've just like scooped the foundations of the entire book series up and scooped it into a single thing, and now we have to shoot off to the stars because we have nowhere else to go because everything is right here in the first movie. There's just a lot of things. I think that the number 19 was really heavy-handedly shoved into the movie. The use of portals was kind of stupid. I'm in the haunted house. I'm not going to go through this crazy portal. I'm going to go into this like electronic sci-fi portal and type in 1919. And I'm going to walk through and it's going to take me where I want to go. And then like Walter has this network of portals that he uses to get around. And the Dixie Pig is like in some stupid shopping mall. I have a lot of ranting. A lot of ranting here, and it's hopping all over the place. The fundamental things that they broke and shattered with the movie is they they made like a completely new story and took the climax from the beginning of book 7 and plopped it in there, and I think that's going to ruin a lot of things because they're not going to have anything to lead up to. And also just they ruined Roland. It's not a good representation of Roland, physically, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, none of it. To touch back on, like I said before, Roland doesn't seem cool. I feel like the choreography was a little weak. Like, if I'm going to see a Dark Tower movie or TV show or whatever, visual adaptation of Dark Tower, I want to see some awesome and like John Wick level gunplay. I mean, like John Wick is super simple too. Like he's super efficient. John Wick 1 and 2, both great action movies, but in this, I never felt like adrenalized, invigorated to see this character who I had read in 7 huge books, who I was really attached to see him visually in an action scene was underwhelming. Like I said, like I felt like he wasn't impenetrable. I felt like the gun sounds did like they weren't very like powerful. You never got a sense of danger from Roland. There was a couple moments. There was the moment from the trailer where he tries to like aim while not looking and like shoots through like 50 things and then kills Cantoy or whatever it is who's taking Jake. That was actually okay in the movie. But the problem with the movie is that it was like a flat line of cool moments for Roland with like 2 good peaks. When I wanted more of like a consistent something. I just felt like the gunplay, like I said, $60 million movie. It had to be quick. I also want to touch briefly on the movie gets really cringy as soon as Roland enters New York. These scenes were bad. These were dumb. And this, like, even further ruined Roland. The scene in the hospital where they just got back and Roland is, like, wounded or whatever. And doctors come in and they're like, well, you're severely radiated. Like, you seem like, what the heck is going on with you? And Roland's like, I need to get to Keystone Earth. Here's a coin. Long days, pleasant nights. And, like, walks off. And it's like, okay, that's stupid. And then they're in the bus going to somewhere. I don't even know where they're going. Jake's like, we're going to find where this portal is that Walter is using. And Roland's like, I don't know, but I'm sure we'll figure it out. And these 2 girls down the bus are, like, calling to Roland. Like, basically, like, checking him out. And he goes, like, you've forgotten the face of your father. And I'm like, oh no, this is bad. This is a bad adaptation. This is not Roland. I never wanted to see this. Okay? You're adapting, you're doing the first Dark Tower movie. I don't want to see Roland in New York in 2017 telling millennial teenage girls that they've forgotten the face of their father. That's not what I want to see from the first Dark Tower movie. Please. No. I check out. Yeah, so it really just boils down to personality-less, bland action movie. You ruined Roland. You did it wrong. And you truncated the whole series into a single 90-minute movie. Um, and you sort of have screwed yourself over by taking the climax from book 7. Uh, I don't know. Um, it wasn't a horrible movie. It just failed as an adaptation. And I mean, that's really all I have to say. Like I said, if I got anything wrong, tell me in the comments so I know. Anything else you want to say, tell me in the comments. Leave a like if you liked it. Leave a dislike if you disliked it. Don't see the movie. Keep reading the books. I don't know. I'm hoping that they don't make a sequel that's in canon with this. I hope that this dies and they can do it again. Like, here's the deal, right? Like, the concept of doing a 20th cycle Dark Tower is interesting, but I don't think it works. Like, I would love to much rather see the 19th cycle, the books, adapted. And the problem with that is The Gunslinger is a messy book and won't work as a movie. Um, I think that they should. I think they should strive to make a Netflix, some kind of TV show thing. Netflix would be great because Netflix is loose with episode numbers and episode lengths. Go with the first 2 Dark Tower books. Make a single season of a Netflix show of The Gunslinger and the Drawing of the Three. Um, you could possibly do The Gunslinger as a single season. It would be short, is the problem. I feel like you could get 10 hours from the first 2 books, easy. And I think that's the way to go. You need the medium of television, of the episodic form, to tell the story right. And that's why I've always been skeptical of a movie. I mean, you could adapt The Gunslinger into a movie, but no one would see it and it would fail. I would love it. I'm sure a lot of other fans would love it, but it would fail. Because you can't market it. Like, you could maybe market that in like the 80s or the 60s before the books were even written. You could film it in some like Italian place, but now you need a budget to film The Dark Tower. And 60 million, it felt like a $60 million movie at the end of the day. Like, it felt cheap. You need a budget. You need an episodic form to let you tell your story without the restraints of a movie. And also just the market for episodic shows is a lot different than movies. You don't have the box office to worry about. It's much different. I feel like that's the way they should have gone. So I'm slightly interested in the Wizard and Glass TV show if it gets made. If it's canon and it's just like a black kid, that's gonna throw me off a little bit because it's like you're still with this idea of the 20th cycle or something. I don't know. It's just not like I said, not racist. It's just gonna remind me of the movie, and I don't want to be reminded of the movie at this point. But I'd love to see a Wizard and Glass TV show. But on the same token, I'd love to see a Dark Tower TV show, which would include Wizard and Glass. So, that's how I feel. Movie is bad. Movie is acceptable for people who haven't seen the books. Movie is terrible for people who have read the books, seen the books. A little concerned for the future of Dark Tower in the cinema. Hopeful for its future at some point on television. And I mean, this is a series that is as expansive as like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. It doesn't have as much lore, it doesn't have as much material, but it is comparable. There is a lot that has happened in this universe, much like Lord of the Rings and Game of Thrones. I don't think that it's as extensive, but it's definitely it is Stephen King's Lord of the Rings for certain. And I don't think that movies will be able to tell that story. I think that there's a reason that Lord of the Rings was 3 books and 3 movies, but that Game of Thrones is 7, 8, 9 books, who knows, a TV show. I think that there's a reason that Game of Thrones was not adapted into 6 movies, even more. Like, if you look at what Game of Thrones has adapted, there's over 60 hours. There's like 67 hours at the end of all this, right? With season 7 finishing up. So that says a lot for how much is in Game of Thrones. There's plenty in Dark Tower as well. You can't tell this in a couple of movies. I think this needs to be a TV show because of how broad it is. That's just me. I'm done. Thank you, Sai, for watching. Long days and pleasant nights. Do not forget the face of your father, etc., etc. I'm going to go cry myself to sleep.